It's something that hits home across the country.
It's an ever-evolving beast.
An issue that weighs on the minds of every American. This week, we're in Oklahoma City talking about national security. This community knows the impact of a threat that we still face today. We're looking into the dangers of terrorism in America, both from the outside and within.
Children or kids, they don't know what they should and shouldn't be doing yet.
How national security has changed in the digital age and what needs to be done to keep us safe. This is The Race. Welcome to The Race. I'm Chris Stewart, and this week we're taking a look at the biggest threats that our country faces when it comes to national security. We're here in Oklahoma City where nearly 25 years ago, 168 people were killed when a bomb went off outside the federal building where this memorial now stands. It's a moment that's considered this community's darkest hour and one that changed the way we view terrorism nationwide. At the Oklahoma City National Memorial and Museum, you'll see a gate that reads 901, a time that represents an innocence.
It was a day like any other day.
Innocence that on April 19th, 1995,
I was a baby lawyer at my very first job.
vanished at 9:02. Melissa McLaughlin Houston was sitting at her desk that morning.
When you're that close, you actually don't hear a boom. The first indication that I had that anything was going on was just a rush of wind, just an unbelievable rush of wind.
She wasn't physically injured when the bomb went off in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, but it left her in shock.
I just had this incredible sense of evil. Just something evil had happened.
Donna Weaver's life also changed that day. Her husband Mike was an attorney on the 8th floor.
He told his sons, told his sons every day that I love you.
He was a dedicated father and a coach.
His little phrase was, as he dropped him off from school, was, I love you and don't you ever forget it.
He's one of the 168 people killed.
And I could see that there was a giant chunk of the building missing.
Donna only worked 2 blocks from the explosion.
I had a voice in my head that said, be careful, be safe, you gotta take care of my boys.
2020 will mark 25 years since this domestic terror attack.
Nobody would have thought terrorism. I mean, back in 1995, that wasn't anything that anyone would have thought of.
Those responsible were Americans, fueled by a hate for the U.S. government.
It's important to continue to know what happened here and how it was done, and that it was done by 2 guys, really.
If you visit the memorial today, you'll find another gate, one that reads 903.
What people, I think, don't realize is how this event was such a fundamental shift for our country, in the way that 9/11 was a fundamental shift for our world.
A time that represents moving forward into a different world, a world born from a threat we still face today.
When you're tested by hate and by violence, we won't let that win.
There's a case involving domestic terrorism that's playing out right now. The FBI arrested a man they say was plotting to blow up a Colorado synagogue. And as Eric Ross found out, plots like this have far-reaching impacts.
On the afternoon of November 4th, 2019, the U.S. Attorney's Office announced the arrest of Richard Holzer, a white supremacist who they say had plans to bomb a Jewish temple in Pueblo, Colorado, about 2 hours south of Denver.
We are here today to announce that federal law enforcement, working in conjunction with the Pueblo Police Department, has successfully stopped what we believe to be an imminent threat of domestic terrorism against a Colorado religious institution.
Authorities say Holzer met up with 3 undercover FBI agents to purchase bombs in a planned attack against Temple Emmanuel, the second oldest synagogue in the state. According to a criminal complaint, FBI agents had been talking with Holzer since September, tracking multiple Facebook accounts of his in which he talked to other white supremacists through private messages about attacking Jewish people. In one message, Holzer said, quote, "I wish the Holocaust really did happen."
Pueblo is a safer place today because of the diligent efforts of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Pueblo Police Department, and the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Holzer told undercover agents he hired someone to poison the synagogue's water supply and was now preparing for a racial holy war.
Jewish community is tiny in Pueblo, and we all know each other and support one another and our children.
35 families are part of this small congregation. Michael Atlas Acuna, the president of Temple Emmanuel's board of directors, is still a bit shaken by the plot to blow up a synagogue that was built in 1900.
I looked at the building inside and I thought, God, we could have lost this.
If there's a silver lining to take away from the foiled terror plot, it's that the congregation is now stronger than ever before.
Let there be peace on earth.
It was a packed house at a recent Friday night Shabbat service, the congregation calling for peace and happiness, and they say they will not let what happened scare them away.
We're going to be here another 100 years. We're going to take the right precautions that we need to take in order to be safe. Maybe the reason was to wake everybody up and realize that that threat is out there and to bring everybody together. And I think the whole community is going to be that much more alert.
If convicted, Holzer faces up to 50 years in prison. For The Race, I'm Eric Ross.
The FBI says it is monitoring domestic terror trends very carefully right now, but critics say they aren't doing enough. Annie Taylor's fact-checking just how often these attacks happen.
Chris, our partner PolitiFact found data on domestic terror incidents isn't as easily available as you might think. The FBI defines domestic terrorism as terror meant to further domestic ideological goals. Those include political, religious, social, racial, or environmental influences. The FBI didn't have domestic terror numbers, but it did say it's noticed a dominant trend in domestic terror, a lone offender with a gun. The FBI says those attackers usually act without any obvious affiliation, which makes them tougher to stop. According to the Department of Homeland Security, terrorists influenced by domestic ideologies have caused more deaths in the U.S. than terrorists connected to foreign organizations. Experts say these far-right terror attacks are becoming more common worldwide. Experts told PolitiFact terror attacks also open the door for misinformation, confusion, and polarized politics. I'm Annie Taylor for The Race.
The way we view terrorism has changed over the years. Our animator Nick Rafferzo taking a look at the evolution.
Terrorism is an age-old concept. Some people think the first attack happened in the 1st century against Roman collaborators. Modern terrorism is thought to come out of mid-19th century France when good quality, affordable explosives hit the market, and radical political movements became more prominent. It's thought to have come to the U.S. during the same time frame. Today, the terrorism landscape is much different, and so is the response. The FBI says its #1 priority is protecting the U.S. from terrorist attacks, regardless of motivation. Terrorism investigations fall into 2 categories at the FBI: international terrorism and domestic terrorism. The first is when an attack is inspired by or associated with foreign organizations or nations. If the attack or attacks are meant to further a domestic influence's goals, it's domestic terror. The FBI's examples of domestic terror motivations include politics, religion, race, social issues. Domestic terror remains persistent overall, according to the FBI. It says people cross the line from exercising First Amendment freedoms to committing crimes in hopes of furthering violent agendas. Terrorism has evolved immensely since 9/11. The FBI says lone offenders and the internet have accelerated that evolution. Lone offenders are tougher to identify and stop because they aren't always clearly tied to a group. The internet, social media in particular, helps terrorists connect with potential recruits more easily. Law enforcement is constantly changing its approach to stopping terrorism.
More Americans are becoming affiliated with terror groups right here at home. A major American city battling homegrown terror. Next on The Race.